Guys, welcome on. I'm just waiting for Zach to join us. Can you hear me okay? Hi, James. I've sent an invite to Zach, so I'm just waiting for him to accept it, and then he should pop in here. I'm seeing thumbs up. Hey, Zach, if you accept the invite that I sent you, it should pop you into this instead of you watching it. Hang on a second, Zach. It's saying you're unable to join. Let me try again. Okay, so I sent another invite. If you accept the invite, it should just put you right in. There you are.
Hey, what's going on?
Not much. Hey, Zach, welcome in.
Hey,
Hey.
I'll have a stand. It's all good. I'll hold my phone. I was like, can I hold it or should I put it on a stand or something?
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever works. I'm just going to give a couple minutes for folks to pop in, and then we can get started.
Sounds good.
Good. All right. I'm waving as folks are joining. Oh, you got your first comment there. Is that?
What's up? What's up, On? How's it going? Yeah.
All right. So some more folks are popping in.
Sounds good.
Okay.
How does this usually work?
So basically, it's just a conversation. The folks that are on, that are watching, can send comments if they want to.
Okay.
But basically, we start out with a little bit of information about you,
Okay.
right? How you got into this, what your kit is, that kind of thing. And then we can talk about Formula Drift after that.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so I guess we'll go ahead and get going. Other people are going to be popping in. If you don't know already, this is Zach. Zach, you want to say your last name? I don't want to butcher it.
Yeah, it's Nuvo. It's a lot easier to say than trying to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Zach Nuvo is your IG handle, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'll put it in once I upload the video too, but if you're not already following him, please follow him. And Zach is here because Nate, who was our guest on episode 3, talked to him about it and kind of connected us together. So Zach and I haven't met in person yet, but we will at Slang and Smoke on the 24th, right? You're going to be there?
I'll be there.
Okay. Okay. So why don't you go ahead and share with us how you got into drift photography?
So I got into drift photography after I stopped driving myself. So I used to drift, way back when, and kind of missed it. So my friends were still driving and drifting at the same time, and I just started streaming, so I bought a camera and everything, and I figured, you know what, let's take it to the track, see if I can get some pictures, and everything's kind of started from there. And that was 2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
When were you drifting?
2017, 2018, somewhere around there.
Okay. What did you drive? Everybody's going to want to know.
Everybody's going to, it was a 240 SX with a 1UZ.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
S14.
Okay. And what was your reasoning for shifting away from that?
Money. It is an expensive sport. I didn't realize that until, I kind of dug myself into a hole, and I was kind of thinking, you know what, maybe I should sell it and kind of focus on something else. And when I look back at it, I do regret selling because it went for way less than what it would have been worth today.
Right. Everything's that way, right? Everything is so much more expensive now, but especially in the car realm, they're getting fewer and fewer, so they're getting more and more expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So what kit do you have? What do you shoot with?
So I have an A7 II that I'm using with a 70 to 200 f4, and then a good friend of mine has been letting me use some of his equipment on and off. That's the A7R3 with the 7200 f2.8.
Okay.
and I as well as using 24 to 70.
Okay.
So I kind of switch
So
off between those two.
is the 24 to 70 your go-to lens, or is it the 70-200?
Depends on the situation. I
Mm-hmm.
like the 70-200 to have that option to like punch in close to a shot, try to get some of the drivers and everything like that.
Okay.
But I feel like the 24 to 70 gives you more of like a storytelling, because it's so wide. You can really see how they're going from one corner to another, or maybe just showing more of the background, and it just depends on like what you're trying to get.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
And
kind of like switching between the two, right?
also the track, right? Because
And the
depending on
track,
distance,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, depending on distance, whether I'm like right up there on pretty much where the clipping point is at, or
Mm-hmm.
if I'm a little bit further away.
Okay.
Um,
And when you started, you were still in Dallas, or were you already in Arizona
I
then?
was still in like Fort Worth, Dallas Fort
Fort
Worth
Worth?
area.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
So I'd go up to the tracks in Oklahoma and down in Houston a lot. So I met a lot of cool people doing all that.
So did you shoot at Speed Sports in Houston?
No.
Oh, okay.
Mm-mm.
So
I,
HPA then? Yeah.
yeah, HPA,
Okay.
MSR. I shot at MSR, uh, Houston Police Academy,
Right.
and then a lot of the Oklahoma tracks like OMC and CAMs and everything like that.
Okay. Okay. And now that you've shifted kind of to Arizona, you're typically shooting Phoenix area, or are you down in Tucson?
Both. I'll try to get all the local events. So whether that be up here in Phoenix or down in Tucson, I'll kind of switch off between the two depending on availability.
Mm-hmm.
So I know if there's two events and they overlap each other on the same weekend, I might pick Tucson over the Wild Horse one, just because I know what the track lighting situation is like in Tucson, and you get to see, you get a lot more opportunities to get a car and get a shot, because there's so much lap time
Mm-hmm.
that it's hard at Wild Horse, because you don't know how it's going to go, whether it's 6 runs for each driver or 12. Tucson, you get like probably 24 to 30 laps a driver.
Mm-hmm. So do you shoot a driver until they're not driving anymore, or do you have a certain number of images that you're trying to get of anybody that you're shooting?
So I haven't really been shooting anybody
Okay.
specifically. Kind of just go in there to have fun, enjoy it, and get as much as I can for whoever that wants it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go until my batteries die and my memory card gets full.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you do video too, or just the photography, still
I'm
photography?
trying to get into video.
Okay.
Not very good at it, but I'll grab some from my phone and then try to throw up like a quick reel or something.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, I mean, that's what everything's moving towards, right? It seems like
Right.
everything's moving towards video.
Yeah. And also short video,
Yeah,
right?
short
Our attention spans
video.
are very short. So
Exactly. Yep. You can thank
yeah,
TikTok and Vine
right.
and all that.
Right. I'm moving into video also, but I also am not good at it. Like still photography is my love. Well, panning shots on track is where I really am happy.
Sure.
But like you said, everybody looks for that, and that's what the drivers are hoping to see. They want to see more of the actual action of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, we have some more folks popping in. Welcome on, guys. So Zach and I are just talking about shooting the kind of tracks that we shoot in Arizona, because I'm kind of moving into that space a little bit, and Zach is going the opposite direction from me. So from, Texas there, and from North Texas there, and I'm more Houston, more speed sports usually, and then now the tracks in Arizona. But I do know that you have shot for Formula Drift, right?
So far, it's only one event at
Okay.
Long Beach. That was my first one this year
Okay.
in April, and
Mm-hmm.
that was definitely an amazing experience.
What's different with Formula Drift versus the more grassroots shooting?
I'd say consistency.
Okay.
Consistency of like where they're placing their cars. And it's not really a fault of grassroots. It's more like in a competition setting, you're kind of forced to go in a certain line, so you know where they're going to be. But as far as like taking pictures goes, FD drivers are going to be more consistent. So if they're on throttle, they're on throttle. There's no like weird quick shift or a left foot brake that jerks the car in a weird way, so it's ruining a shot, right?
Right.
That's the biggest thing. Safety is also a big difference, at least as far as like going from some like Texas side of photography to shooting here in Arizona and shooting FD. Seems like there's more rules depending on where I go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially,
So
Musselman is pretty strict.
Yeah, for sure.
And the time that you can get on the track versus get back off the track is always, like you said earlier, they get a lot of lap time, but that also means you're out there for a couple of hours.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So when you shot the actual drivers, did you feel like they were looking for something different in the shots than maybe grassroots, or is it similar, the kind of style?
I feel like it's similar. I feel like a lot of the drivers that I talk to, well, depending on grassroots level, they're really happy to get pictures of their car. So there's less, what's the word I'm looking for? Less scrutinizing over each picture.
Right.
Whereas FD, I feel like I would have to tell a story, try to get something that stands out or is a little different than what somebody else got.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say they're looking for anything specifically.
Okay. But you are trying to set yourself apart, right? Because you're not specifically shooting one driver, you were just shooting the event.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So I was there shooting for Maximum Driftcast.
Okay.
They're the ones that let me pretty much get my foot in the door and start building up my professional portfolio.
Okay.
So goal-wise is to, yes, get picked up by a team, and then it's more like once my portfolio is built to a certain, level, they'll see it and say it fits their style of what they're looking for, then that's when I'll kind of hopefully land those.
So is that a goal with how you're shooting, is to shift more into professional, like for Formula Drift, or are you wanting to stay kind of in both?
I'd stay in both. Because like I said, it's very similar to drivers where you get, track time or seat time. Same thing with photography. The more you're out there, the more you shoot, the more consistent you'll get. So everything, like all that kind of adds up and helps. What was the original question? Am I wanting to shift to it?
Yeah.
So I want to shift to more professional photography, just so I can, we go to the bigger events and do things like that. But I also want to get into other kinds of motorsports.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that professional level experience and, knowing track safety and all that stuff would be beneficial going into a different sport.
Right. So I think that's interesting to kind of share with everybody, because I know several of us, we're in the grassroots range, and then we're wanting to move into that possibly more professional Formula Drift, or like Nate shot motorcycles. Like, what was your thought process with that? Did you reach out to who got you the foot in the door, or were you just building your portfolio hoping someone would see it?
It was a little bit of both. So, Maximum Driftcast has Paco, Corey, and Sam. And I know Corey and Paco are local here in Arizona. So Paco, I guess, I don't know if he's the owner or the founder of 2F Performance. They build kits and stuff for a lot of the drivers in FD. He hosts monthly like car meet type, like just hangout events at the shop.
Okay.
So we'll go there and we'll talk. And then I know Josh, he's another photographer, and he's kind of like introduced me to Paco. And then, Paco started seeing some of my work, and that gave me the opportunity to ask if there was any chance that I could cover some FD events for them this year, knowing that Josh wasn't going to be able to do it this year.
Okay. So through networking, you're able to kind of figure out. Yeah. Okay. Do you feel like there's a certain requirement to work with those drivers? Like you have to have so much in your kit, or you have to shoot a certain way? Like, does it change how you're shooting if you're trying to move yourself into that direction?
I I haven't found that to be the case at all.
Okay.
Like you said, it's through networking, kind of talking to people, get trying to get to know them, and having them get to know you, and then your work will kind of like speak for itself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, this doesn't sound right, but I wouldn't say there's a requirement that you would need to do, or like a minimum gear or anything like that. For the longest time, I shot on kit lenses, using a little APS sensor camera, and I found that to be plenty until it wasn't.
Right.
Which it wasn't, not because of what I was shooting, but where or how. Wild Horse, moving to Arizona, all the events started to be at night, so a lot of the low light situations, I figured I would need to go to a lower aperture or a lower f-stop lens and a full frame sensor, and that did help out a lot.
Yeah. Especially Wild Horses, that's always a crapshoot, right?
Yeah.
We have no idea how the lighting's going to be.
No,
there's not
never.
really any guarantee of how you're going to be able to move around and stuff like that. So
exactly,
you really have to make sure that you have a better zoom than a kit lens, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It helps.
Yes.
But it's possible. It's possible to do without. It's just going for, I mean, sometimes that's part of the adapting part of photography. You just use what you have and try to adapt to it. And then that could kind of introduce you to a new style of how you want to shoot the photo, right? So
do you
that's
mind elaborating on that for the folks that are watching?
Yeah, so it's more like when I first moved here and I shot the first event, it was dark. I hated how my photos turned out. So on the next event, I decided to kind of work with the darkness and use that harsh lighting that they offer out there to my advantage, and gave it like this 90s tuner magazine kind of vibe. So it was, darker, it was kind of grainy, gave it a little like a not really a sepia kind of filter over it, but just warmed up the photo just ever so slightly, and it really helped stand out on those shots.
Well, and that's, part of one of the things that I think doesn't get mentioned enough. When you're first starting out, you see all these people that have the white lens, right? The white lens is super expensive, and you're like, oh crap, well, I can't do this because I don't have that, or I can't afford that. But in reality, it's really trying to work with whatever you have and make it benefit you.
Exactly. And that's, like you said, it's part of being flexible and adapting to it. I'm trying to remember, honestly, how I came about it. It was just because of the harsh light. So I'd have spots that were underexposed and overexposed, and then really try to balance it out, and kind of gave me an idea to do that 90s-ish theme.
Right.
Yeah.
Which allows you to take something that might have been frustrating in the moment and have it fit you and what you're putting out there, right? So
exactly.
That's a really good thing to kind of keep in mind for those of you that are wanting to do this or start into the drift media thing, is you don't have to have your stuff look like everybody else's, and you don't have to hit the shots the same way as everybody else does. It's really actually beneficial to you if you have your own style, or if you're able to adapt like that, right? Because if you start going to more tracks, which is a goal of mine this year, you get really used to your home track. And you know how to shoot it, and you know where you need to be, you know what your shutter is going to be, all of that stuff. And when you go to a new track, it's like, crap. Okay, hang on, I got to figure this out.
Like, what am I supposed to do here?
Yeah, totally. And do you seek out still that 90s style, that tuner mag style? Or
no, it just depends on how they're like how the photos are coming out for that event. So right now I'm trying to do, I don't know what I'm like a more of a natural-ish type look.
Okay.
So natural color grading, but still with my style of like darks and in saturation or like color wise. So trying to get them to pop, but not stand out too much. Like I want to get it as natural as I can, but not so much. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
Okay.
I tend to shoot that way personally. I kind of want what I'm seeing in my eye in my shot, but I don't actually color grade. So for those folks that don't know what that is, would you like to share what color grading is or your process for color grading?
Like, I don't even know if I can explain it either. We might have to circle back on that. Okay.
We can circle back on that. That's fine. No problem. So we've got some more folks that have popped in. So I'm saying hello to everyone that's come in. If you have any questions for Zach, feel free to type them in and I will ask him. We're just talking about styles and how that kind of changes depending on what track you're at or what you're shooting, and how sometimes editing can really save you when the lighting on the track is trying to sink you, basically. Yes. You get into that place where you're just like, well, okay, I just got to do what I can do with whatever I have. Have you shot anything other than Sony, or has it been Sony the whole time?
It's been Sony the entire time.
Okay.
I do remember one event I was shooting with my buddy Ray, and he kind of just gave me his camera to try out, and he shoots on a Canon. I don't remember which model, but I know that it threw me through a loop trying to figure out how to set it up right. And the photos ended up coming terribly, so I kind of gave the camera back to him. I was like, you know what? You hang on to this. This is yours. I'm just going to figure out my own path.
Yeah, I feel like once you're a Canon shooter or a Sony shooter or a Nikon shooter, then you tend to kind of stay in that lane, because B-Way, he's my son, he's on now, he shoots Sony, and before I upgraded, my Canon could not do low light. I would be dead in the water at Wild Horse if I tried to shoot on my previous camera. So he would just hand his camera over to me at night so I could get low light shots. But I would just be lost. So he would have to preset it and hand it to me. And I'm like, I feel like I've never taken a photo before because it's so different.
It's very different. He was also the first photographer that I met that did the back button focus. So I was, when I first started, I was still using like a half click and then so they didn't come in focus either. So that was interesting for that.
When you're
now that's all I have.
So go ahead.
Oh, sorry, that's all I shoot now is just back button focusing. Okay. Yeah.
Is there a certain, trying to figure out the right way to ask or say this the way that my brain is thinking it, like, do you have a certain look or a certain part of the car that you're wanting to catch when it comes through? Are you more looking for those like front end shots or whole body or smoke?
So it's been a struggle for me. The last two events that I've shot, I've kind of missed my focus point. When I first started though, I would typically aim for like a headlight or the mirror. Those are typically like my shooting points. Lately I've been trying to get the driver. But then I've also had issues where the last two events I had the face detect on my camera. So it was trying to pick up helmets and faces. So I would miss my focus point from trying to get the front of the car. I would completely miss it.
Well, and that's something good to note for folks that are wanting to do this more, do this better or whatever, is your focal point can really affect how the photo turns out and what your hit rate is, right? We talked about hit rate before with Nate and some of the other, is like going through and editing and culling all these photos and you're like, zoom in, no, zoom in, no. Yeah. And that's part of it. Nate, He talked about how he clears his while he's on track, and I guess I have too much FOMO. Like I just want to keep catching people
Oh,
as
just
they're
keep on going.
going
Yeah,
by. Yeah, and look at it later. I'll just deal with it
that's
later, even though
exactly how I do it.
I hate culling so much.
Yeah.
But I know that there's going to be a ton, and then it's such a pain. Gabe said he will see us both next weekend. Yes,
Oh
looking
yeah.
forward to that.
At the at the modded culture event.
Yep,
Yep.
yep. So
We'll be there.
I met Gabe at Musclemen during Drift Week 7.
Oh, nice.
So that's where we met on track there. So I haven't seen any questions come through yet. So feel free, you guys, to add some questions. So if you shoot this similar to how I shoot, where you're just hitting it the whole time, so we have I Heart Zach.
What's going
Very
on, T?
nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you end up with a lot of photos that you're culling at the end. What is it specifically that you're looking for in a shot that makes you keep it versus get rid of it?
Well, it's gonna sound very. I'd say it's cliche a little bit. I'm just looking for my first sift or my first run through. I'm kind of looking for what is in focus. Yeah. After that, I'll run it again for anything that might be a little soft focused, but still of an interesting shot. An interesting shot being how it's composed, or maybe the lighting was right on it. Something that stands out. I don't really know how to explain it. Kind of just like speaks to you.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that'd be really, really cool.
Right.
I know I got a picture at Long Beach that was completely out of focus on Forrest Wing as he's coming around the last inner, but I was like, this is really interesting still. I really like how wide the shot is. You can see, like, you just tell that it's Long Beach, and decided to keep it. But I don't there's really nothing, any like specifics that I do. I kind of just put everything in a Lightroom, and it's different because I don't do it the same way that a lot of photographers do, and I'll still upload everything, and then just click an arrow key and just go on to the next one, and the next one. So you see your burst when you're doing your painting, like 5 shots, and I'll pick the best one out of the 5 and put that into my album.
Okay, I've got a bunch of questions that just popped in. So what did you say the average hit rate is? I didn't say because it really depends on if I'm trying to do slow shutter, my hit rate is going to be so much worse. The more I go down from, so my starting shutter is 1/50 usually. The more I go down from there, the less I'm going to hit. That's pretty much the math there. What would you say that yours is?
I did the math on it a while back. I don't remember. So out of like 4,000 pictures that I took at Long Beach, I think I only kept 130. So I'm like 0.06% on my hit rate. And that's just how I shoot. I'm like a strength in numbers kind of person. So the probability of me hitting more shots is, or getting more in focus shots, is taking more pictures. How I do it.
And doing the burst.
And doing the burst. And that's where all the photos come from, is just from doing long burst. And just like how you explained, I mean, I start high too, start like maybe 1/25th, 1/125th. So I'll start there and kind of work my way down. And I'm starting high to make sure I get those like guaranteed shots. So if it's important, or if it's a client and I know they're coming by, I'll get my guarantees for them, and then maybe later towards the event, I'll start slowing it down to something crazy, 1/15, and try to get them that way.
That's a really good thing to keep in mind, is that when you're messing with the camera like that and you're not guaranteeing your hit rate, if you have someone that's a client, that's going to be different than I'm just showing up, shooting whatever I get, and sending it out. Like if you're doing client work, they want very specific kind of a look or feel, or how much of it has to be in focus and that sort of thing. So that'll affect how you shoot. How soon does an edited picture usually take to go up, or how long should it take?
Okay, so on regular events, like our local events, I will typically try to get it out. So the event's on Saturday. Sunday, I spend going through my first round, so I'll upload Saturday night into my computer. Sunday is usually first batch, and then through Monday, Tuesday, I'll kind of go through the rest and do like my next rounds. And then I would say by Wednesday, I'll usually have photos up, posted.
Like all of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do like teaser stuff on like my story and maybe a few posts here and there, but it's all going to my album or my website or Google Photos all at the same time, and then that's where I publish from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it harder to get photos of black cars? So I did a series on so you want to paint your drift car to give you an idea of what photographers see when we look at the paint on your car. Black cars are great in the daylight. Black cars are difficult at night. Like it's about how much light and contrast we can get on that image so that the camera can focus and track you guys. So if it's a black car and it's night and at Wild Horse, the camera's not even going to see you.
No, definitely not.
Like, it's not. So, but the other caveat that I will say on the black car situation is if it's a matte black car, that kind of affects daytime a whole lot at night, but also during the daytime because it just absorbs the light. It doesn't bounce anything back to the camera.
Yep.
Okay.
I find my lens and my camera hunting a lot when it comes down to those matte black cars.
Yep. What shutter speed do you use for cars that are going 80 to 100 miles per hour?
I don't know if I've actually got cars going that fast, if I'm being honest. I would start high for sure, especially because they're already going so fast. If you shoot at 121 over 125th, that's going to have a lot of motion going on in the background anyways, and you might have a higher chance of getting that car in focus and on shot. I would start there, maybe 160th.
Yes, that's right, 1/160th. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Maybe start there and kind of start working your way down.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I have. Do you drift in a Seto?
I do drive in a Seto. That's my wheel back there.
Yep.
I'm not on as actively as I used to be, but I still get on and have some fun with some friends.
Okay. So different from when you were actually drifting
100%
on track.
different.
This keeps it going for you a little bit.
It scratches the itch very slightly, but it's still fun.
Yeah.
It pushes me to kind of keep up with it.
So in Long Beach, you don't think that the cars were going that fast?
I wouldn't say that fast. Maybe the run up to the first to the initiation seemed a lot shorter than it was last year. I was watching it on TV, right? And just going from like a Assetto Corsa experience, you're scrubbing so much speed, you're probably going like 50, 40, 50, especially when you get around the outer zones and the before you get to the touch and go and the last inner clip. There's not a whole lot of speed. I would still probably say 45 to 55, but maybe we can ask one of the drivers on a...
I have a Long Beach is 60 to 70, if I recall correctly, at initiation.
Is it really? Wow, okay. That's pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean...
Well, granted, yeah, they're fast cars. They're like 1,000 horsepower cars, so
yeah,
that is a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some pretty fast. I wouldn't know exactly how fast cars going through at Musselman, because that first they're able to really take that long initiation point, and then as they go in, that first one they're pretty fast. Like Naoki, he just flipped himself backwards, and like the explosion of dirt that came up when he went off track, I would think he was going pretty fast.
That's fair.
I've got Nate asking, Do you have a tip or a eureka moment that elevated your photography? What helped you level up?
Oh, eureka moment. Honestly, it was panning. So before I learned how to pan, it was just all very fast shutter speeds where I'm freezing the image, and that was at the last ones I remember was at MSR in Houston. I was shooting really fast. I didn't like how my photos turned out, and I was using the A6000 with an adapter with a Canon lens on it. So it was super slow to autofocus. So I had to force myself to manual focus on a lot of it. So that helped out. But the eureka was landing panning shots and then starting to land it more consistently. That'd probably be my eureka moment.
So one of my suggestions or tips about panning or landing panning, as we're talking about that, is sometimes when I'm out on track, I'm not shooting, I'm watching, especially if it's a driver I've never shot before. I don't know how consistent they are. I don't know how their entry is going to be. Some of them, are just going to do a clutch kick. Some of them are going to e-brake a lot. Like there's going to be a different way that they run. So sometimes it's helpful to just wait and kind of get an idea of how they are. And then when they come around again, you'll be prepared for how that works out with them. Let's see, 120 plus on the back straight at MSR. Yeah, that's a fast track. I haven't shot that track, but I've heard how fast it is.
Yeah, it's okay. So it kind of circles back to Long Beach in their entry speeds. We weren't allowed to go down there where they're entering at. So most of the there's a bunch of people lining up where the boot was at, and that's after initiation. You have the touch and go, the first outer, and then the second outer. So where they're coming down that little straight and transitioning, that's pretty much where a lot of the drivers or photographers were looking down that little alley. I mean, when they're coming straight at you, 60, 80, 100, it's really kind of all the same when they're coming directly towards you.
Right. Well, and so that brings up a question. And the person that's been asking the questions, it's GR4RCE is leaving and said, someone else asked questions. Thank you for all your questions.
Take care.
How do you set yourself apart when safety means that all y'all are in one little pocket, right? Because then you don't have the variation of angles or the variation of location. So how do you set yourself apart in that kind of environment?
Okay, so when I was at Irwindale for Hot Pit, I stayed for a little bit and then try to get different angles. So I'd kind of get lower, or maybe I'd shoot a little higher and try to get a different angle that way. But my best way was to just move to a different location to get something that not everybody else was getting. But angles do help out a lot. It's almost to the point where I want to buy like a portable step stool just so I can get maybe a foot or 2 foot higher and get some of those top-down shots, which would be great.
Yeah, that's I think is one of the benefits of Muscleman is the bird cages, because that gets you a different angle. But also there's like cholla right there. So I have some shots from that track through the cholla from the bird cage. So that gives you something to work with too. Do you ever use things in the foreground of your photos, or is it all about trying to find angles?
Because I'm still in that learning stage, I'm trying to find those angles. I am going to start introducing some foreground or stuff to the foreground, whether that be like K-rails, kind of just giving those leading lines kind of shots, and maybe some like shrubbery or plants. There's something to kind of separate. I wanted to try something like that, but I haven't really found it to work out for me yet.
Gabe says, due to short people, LOL, story of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, height and everything is going to play a role in what kind of photos you get. But there's one of the photographers that's at Speed Sports has started bringing out a step stool and just getting up onto the step stool when we're shooting. So you can find different ways to kind of get yourself into different positions, and that can help you. So you mentioned leading lines. So for people that don't know what leading lines are, do you want to let them know what they are?
The way I understood leading lines was, I understood leading lines as kind of like how artwork, if you're looking at something and you're seeing like it's not just a straight line, it's kind of leading towards your subject. That's how I kind of remember it. So I'm trying to angle some of the K-rails to point towards the direction of what I'm trying to shoot, so that way it draws your attention to its subject or to your subject.
Yes, that's exactly it. And you also can edit your photos to kind of bring that in if it's not artificially there, right? If you don't have poles or you don't have rails or whatever, you can edit a photo so that the car itself is a leading line, so that you're following from the front to the back of the car. And it's just a way to bring somebody more into the photo. And you mentioned a couple of times the story. So that helps with your storytelling, right? When you're on like a wider shot.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So let me see if we have any more questions. Does anybody else want to ask Zach a question, either about shooting for Formula Drift or just how you kind of moved into where you are, right? You said that you feel like you're still learning. I think we all are. But would you consider yourself like it's a lot of learning, or you have
a lot of learning to do? Yeah.
Let's see. Are you referring to vanishing points to help for leading lines? I don't.
I'm
haven't heard it.
Quite sure.
Yeah, I haven't heard it that way, Zeus. So you kind of mentioned, this is going to kind of pull to that, about when you first started shooting really fast and stopping. And I think every photographer that I've talked to so far has had that same situation where back in the day, they used to tell you to stop the motion, like you want to get whatever it is as crisp and clean as you can. And so all of us, I feel like, started that way and then have kind of transitioned to more blur, transitioned to more movement, slower shutter, all that stuff. But with leading lines, my understanding of it is similar to Zach's, whereas there's something in the foreground or something closer to you that helps you go from the front of the photo to the back, right? So you're either the car itself or rails or whatever, something is giving you this kind of drawing in from out here into the photo, so you look a little deeper into it. So I don't know if that answered your question, Zeus, but that's kind of my understanding of. I have Locon Creative. Was 200 long enough for a Formula Drift event?
Depends on which one you're going to. So it was plenty long enough for Long Beach. I will have to find out at Seattle. In Utah, I'll find out there as well. I've heard Road Atlanta, depending on where you are, you're going to want a longer lens. And same with Irwindale. If you want to get them right up on the bank, definitely going to want something to punch in a little bit more.
So track specific.
It is track specific. In my kit, my go-to would be the 7200 and the 24-70. I'll have both lenses on its own camera body, and I'll switch between the two depending on how I want the shot to look.
Okay, that's a good point. Question: you miss drifting, or now do you prefer 100% photography?
I miss it. I'm in the position to where I could afford to do it now. It's more or less the starting cost, the upfront cost of having to buy a car and then going back and going on track. That'd be expensive, especially out here where driver fees are a lot more than what they would typically be in Oklahoma and in Texas. Well, granted, Lone Star Drift is pretty expensive for a driver entry, but full log drift in Oklahoma is a lot cheaper. Okay,
that's interesting. I didn't know that about Lone Star Drift. I know, being in Arizona, I've had to adapt to paying as media.
That is
which is not what happens in Texas. So, I mean, at least not at Speed Sports. I was using my 200 at Atlanta, wish I had a 300, but the 200, in my opinion, worked perfect because I was able to get more sections of the track from one location point. So that's from Gabe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Atlanta has, at least from what I've seen, a lot more kind of long areas where you're
Mhm.
not necessarily right on top of the drivers.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think where they were at Atlanta, 200 wouldn't fine because they were along the keyhole on the
Mm-hmm.
back where the judges were. I think 200 would be okay right there. But going further, if you want to get them, coming down the long straight and initiating, you're definitely gonna want something longer because you're shooting from up where the keyhole's at, or maybe along the sides. Figured longer would be better there, especially if you want to punch in and get closer.
Right. Nate said RF 100 to 300 2.8 with little drool emojis. I think that's the lens that got served to me on a Instagram ad, and it was like $9,000 or something
Yeah,
crazy.
they're
So,
crazy expensive.
well, and that's kind of, it's interesting because you said like the costs of drifting is what kind of moved you away from it, but the costs of gear can be
Yep.
pretty high on their own. So,
Yeah, it's a give and take. Where at least photography, it's all that upfront cost, but it's not your maintaining cost, right? So
mm-hmm,
buying tires have gotten more expensive too.
mm-hmm,
I remember KR20s were $90, and now I think they're selling for like 125.
mm-hmm,
And then they have their new ultra high performance that are like 150 a tire.
mm-hmm.
So
Is there something that you want to add to your kit? Is there a lens you're coveting? Is there a lighting setup you want? Is there something on that
okay,
list?
so it circles back to what I started with is I'm kind of in between borrowing some equipment. So
Mm-hmm,
definitely want to buy a newer body that's
mm-hmm,
my own, maybe a A7 IV. I feel like the 7200 is good. I think I would just end up getting a 2x converter
mm-hmm,
and seeing how that works out before I decide to put more money into like a 400 mil lens or a 600,
right.
because those are where it gets really pricey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you do any sort of like pit photography or just, is it just track?
Pit. I'll I'll walk around and try to get pit photos and photos on grid to try to change things up. But right now, my focus, because my hit rate is so low, is I want to be on track as much as I can to
Mm-hmm.
make sure I get at least one of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And it was just mainly like if you're doing pit photography, do you find that you rely more on the 2470 or are you able to actually do that with the 7200?
You could do it with the 7200. It's funny because a lot of people, I guess, they don't see you when you're that far away, because I
Mm-hmm.
like to use the 7200 and kind of punch in
Mm-hmm.
so that way I can get more compression on the photo.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'll be way further back and everybody's just crossing in front of me, and I'm like, okay,
Yes.
well, maybe I'll use the 74 or the 24 to 70 and you know get closer photos instead. That way
Mm-hmm.
they'll see me, and it's not their fault. They just don't realize that I'm there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. I have prime lenses that I do for pit photography, or
Okay.
I have like a 2875
Yeah.
that I use a lot because it
Okay.
does give me that wide, but it also can punch in a
Yeah.
little bit. Okay, so we're already at 749, 750, which is normally where we cap this.
Okay.
So before we shut down, if anybody has any other questions for Zach, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for you guys to do that. And if not, then we will just call it here. I'm going to give him a minute, see if anybody pops in with a question. If there's
Sounds
anything
good.
else you want to share, Zach, feel free. Anything you want to talk about in terms of your photography or?
Well, right now I'm still waiting for the FD season to finish up with me covering the last 3 events.
Mhm.
So maybe on next year's uh, photo chat, we can kind of circle back to the FD
Yeah,
on it.
sure.
But yeah, it kind of just goes back to what I was saying before. It doesn't matter so much on what gear you have, so definitely don't need to pay attention to all the other photographers and what gear they're running. Kind of just go out there and challenge yourself with what you have, and see what works best for you. And you might be able to find your own style that way too.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent point. And really, you can have the most expensive kit, you can have the most expensive equipment, but if you don't know how to use it, it's not going to matter, right? Like you need to be able to use whatever you have to the best of its ability. And that really is, like you were saying, the difference between half shutter or back focus and all of those kind of fine details in shooting. If you are working yourself to that point, then any upgrade is really just going to look like a huge level up because you were already pushing that thing to the furthest that it could go, right? Yeah, okay. All right, so Gabe says, see you next weekend. Yes, at 5. That's when we have to be there.
Yeah.
And Locon Creative says, enjoyed the chat. Cheers. Thank you, guys. I so appreciate everybody who comes on and watches these and asks questions, just hangs out with us, and all of the photographers that are willing to do this. I so appreciate it. So after this is over, I will post up the video, and I will make sure that Zach is tagged so you guys can go and follow him. Oh, wait, we have one more question before we go. How do you all find the discipline to edit so fast? I'm pretty tired for a couple of days after an event.
Lots of Red Bull. Yep, caffeine and Red Bull. I will upload everything and kind of just knock it out. Because at least in my mind, I'm trying to get it out as fast as I can for it to stay relevant to the event that it was at.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I feel that also. I am not as quick as like Nate. He gets his stuff up the same night, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
So I will do a first cull, and usually I can find something in my first cull where I'm like, okay, I'm going to post that. So I edit it super quick, and then I post it. Nate says, force yourself. I mean, yeah, pretty much. Like for me, it's the excitement of, we just did this thing and I want everybody to see it like as quickly as I can. To your point, staying relevant, but just they're still kind of in that high of shooting, at least I am, that I'm like, oh yes. Like when I look at them, and as we've discussed, hit rate can be really low. So if I find something immediately that I'm like, yes, it was in focus, I'm going to post it.
Yes, exactly.
Because then that helps me face all the ones I have to call that I don't want to, see all the ones out of focus. Yeah. So that's how I do it. Okay. So I think that is our last question. Again, I thank you so much for being here, and I will get this uploaded as soon as I can. All right.
Good. Thank you so much for having me on. Yep. Take care, everybody.
All right. See you next weekend.
All right. See you all next weekend.
Bye.
Bye.